Thank you, Judith. And we also have two of our other BACFI committee members with us. We've got Gaynor and Grant, and I should have said earlier on that we will be taking questions at the end of the session. We've had some questions put in before the seminar that we'll deal with, and if we have time to deal with any others, we will do. So please do use the meeting chat room facility to send in your questions, and Gaynor is going to kindly deal with those questions at the end. So Gaynor is General Counsel at the CLS Group, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Rebecca. So I qualified as a barrister in 1994, which makes me feel very old now when I say I work full-time. I've been General Counsel at CLS for many years now. I joined CLS in 2013. I run a global team, as well as having 2 teenage children, lots of animals, a husband to deal with. So all the challenges that a lot of other people face as well. Prior to joining CLS, I was with a number of investment banks. So I started in practice. I pretty quickly area. And started off at JP Morgan and then worked through various different places. So yeah, a busy life.
Thank you very much, Gaynor. And this brings us on to Grant, who is also an employed barrister, and he's in the oil industry. And I'll leave you to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So yeah, as you said, I'm an employed barrister working mainly in the oil and gas industry. My focus really is on the kind of formation and ongoing operation of quite complex international JVs, with a bit of a background in mergers and acquisition, corporate, and obviously the core of oil and gas. Oil and gas has meant that I've had the privilege living and working in some pretty fun jurisdictions. They include a few years in Moscow, Iraq, Iran, West Africa, possibly the most difficult of all being West London for a short period of time, but that's recently changed because I now have a new role as Deputy General Counsel of an oil and gas company based actually in Sydney, Australia, which is where I am not right now. I am still in London, and we'll come to that in a little while when I talk about it. I also have the pleasure of being the current treasurer of the Bar Council, and obviously one of the committee members of BACFI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant. So, and just finally, a little bit about myself. I'm also an employed barrister. I'm at the Serious Fraud Office as the Associate General Counsel. Prior to that, I was at 2 Bedford Row for 10 years practicing as a criminal barrister. I left the self-employed bar to move into the employed bar to focus on the my domestic and international bribery work, which I have been doing, and very fortunate enough to have been part of the legal team that won an award of the Employed Bar Awards that was just done this year. I have to say I'm still waiting for my virtual award, but nevertheless still an award, so I'm very happy with that. So this really, we've got a little bit of an introduction. If anyone is just joining us now, we were just giving an introduction as to who we are. We've got 3 panel members here, and then myself. And we'll just kick off with giving you a little bit of a snapshot into the kind of experiences that we each have had, and then Judith will reply to those experiences. So for my own part, what I have found interesting over these past few months is how I've been politely observing how my very dear friends and family have been reacting to the government advice as it has been going on, certainly through the earlier parts of the year. And I felt very disappointed when I could see people not taking it as seriously as myself. And I have to say that's probably because I have very close family members working in the NHS and were very much on the front line during the whole experience. And so I was getting very regular updates as to exactly what was going on. So naturally that had an impact in how I reacted to the situation and how we reacted as a household. I feel that I was actually shielding, even though I was not within the category of what a shielding person should be. And so, yes, I was that person cleaning my groceries, but leaving them by the door first for a few hours before I'd clean them. That's how I was dealing with it in the house. So I would put myself certainly in the box of dealing it in a very serious way. And really, that has really brought me down to where we are now. And how does somebody like me deal with getting back onto public transport, getting back out there? I haven't even been in a supermarket. I try to avoid going to the local shop if I can, and going on public transport, well, I definitely have not been on public transport. And for me to get to work, I will have to use a very busy train. I will have to go on the tube at rush hour. There is no other option for me to get to work in any other way. So Judith, with somebody with my kind of background, and I'm sure I'm not alone, I hope I'm not alone, how would I sort of try to deal with all of that and getting back into work?
Yeah, a really good question, and I hear you know, how important it is to have some sort of structure and some strategies for managing that. I think just before I answer that specifically, Rebecca, what I'd like to do is put it perhaps into some context. And so if I can just spend a couple of minutes, because I'm going to refer to remind ourselves how two basic systems work, how our physiological response system works and how our psychological response system works. So I think the first question, you know, really we have to understand is why the brain allows this anxiety. And I think that's clearly the state we're talking about. You know, when you've just you know, recounted how you have been over these last few months. And you know what the anxiety does is it really hijacks our everyday, what I would call our everyday operating system, which in normal times allows us to regulate how we feel, how we think, and how we behave. All three link. So if we have a good thought, it makes us feel good. If we feel good, we usually take a positive action. And in good times, this flows relatively normally. Right now, we are dysregulated between those 3 points. And so everything becomes less certain. And when things are less certain, anxiety is allowed to step in. And anxiety loves two things. It loves uncertainty, and nothing more than change is a signal for uncertainty and therefore anxiety to become an everyday part of our life. So that's the first thing to understand, just why you know, we feel dysregulated and why anxiety is there. The second thing to understand, I think, really about this, just to bring it into a system, why our operating system in the first place is dysregulated. And it's dysregulated because it's doing exactly the job it is meant to be doing. Our nervous system, which is really what we're talking about here, only has one role in its existence, and that is to give us a cue for safety or a cue for danger. That's all it's doing in its entire process, is does this feel safe or does this feel dangerous? And then we make a story out of that, or anxiety makes all the time. If we think back over the last 3 months, we've lived in our nervous system detecting cues for danger. And if we listen to the news, the words we hear are the threat posed by COVID. We know that we're living in a world where isolation is part of our everyday experience. And that equates, you know, we live with danger, the dangers of the disease. If we hear those over and over again, the response to our systems is we will go to a place of fear. Starting point, you know, these are the places the state is on high alert, and our response is to be in touch with anxiety. So that's just to sort of put those in there. We're looking for cues for safety, cues for danger. So the very first thing is, you know, can we manage better the cues for danger? And my belief is very much yes, we can, because we actually have to acknowledge that although the talk, the media is all about threat, actually we're much more in a risk environment than we are in a threat environment. And actually humans, we're quite adept at dealing with risk. We manage risk normally without even giving it a second thought. And you know, there's many examples of this. We put a car seat in the car for a child to travel in. We allow an extra 20 minutes to get to work in rush hour. We write health and safety policies. We run risk assessments. So actually, we are really good at dealing with risk. because we are able to use our intelligence to how to work with. We have to come back to knowing, actually, if we regard ourselves as something, this is a risk management exercise, we actually have more skills that we can draw on. So I think that's the first thing that I would say around that. The second is, once we've sort of worked with the place that we're coming from, a place of risk, which we know we can create strategies for, we have to manage anxiety, because anxiety is the sort of the undermining part that goes, but what if? And, you know, we have that sort of space to focus on being able to work well. And with anxiety, you know, the best way in order to do that is to counter it. It loves uncertainty, so we have to put certainty into our lives. There is a way in which, you know, the belief around that is being able to say, I know what to do. That simple refrain of, I know what to do. Actually, I know how to get to work. I know how to go to the supermarket, and I know how to do that. I'm going to break it down into manageable places, because actually there's a fear around it. So what do we do with immediately all out, full hog? You know, remember we dropped into this situation. We had no transition. But actually, we can transition out of it. We don't need to go out of it in the same way that we arrived into it. We actually have much more resource. So a dry run, can you go on the tube for one stop? Get one stop, walk home. See if that makes a difference. You know, all these things are being able to recognise actually you still are in touch with the ways in which you can cope. But before you go on the tube, have a strategy, have a routine, have an organisation. If you wake up in the morning going, right, I'm going to get in the shower, brush my teeth, choose my outfit, go downstairs, have some cornflakes, you know, 3 other things, and then I'm going to leave the house. Trust me, by day 3 of running through that routine, you will be so bored with it, you will be jumping to get to the point where you get on the tube. Because what you're doing is you're reminding your head, it knows how to make strategies, it knows what to do. And actually it'll jump through that, but it's a resetting process. We're trying to re-engage parts of our system that enable us to cope and work through steps. So breaking things down, small manageable steps, strong routines, telling ourselves that actually we're working really with risk and we're adapted, we've evolved to be able to cope with risk in life, and making sure that we really have routine and structure to combat anxiety is a really good starting place for being able to take those steps back to work, as opposed to statement, I'm going back to work. It's all about softening the response so it doesn't go into cue for danger. It hears cue for alert. What do I do? So we're back in taking over a little bit more of our response system.
And that's really helpful. Thank you for taking that on board. I might make my breakfast really long. I've got several steps.
yeah, absolutely.
But I'll certainly be doing that. Thank you very much. And I think, Gaynor, this takes us on to your.
Sure. So I'm coming from a slightly different angle, Judith, which is the manager. So as you know, and as I mentioned, I have a very diverse team. It's a global team. So it's very different across the board in terms of not only geography, but age, background, circumstances, you know, sensitivities, challenges, whatever, you name it, everyone is different.
Yeah.
And I have pretty early on in this, we locked down probably a little bit earlier than most. And what I found pretty quickly was that every single person was experiencing this and reacting to this differently. Yeah. Even the individuals that I would actually have said were very similar from a team perspective, were experiencing very different feelings as a result. I think for me there's been a real need as a manager to kind of absorb those anxieties in some way, you know, and to really try and become not only a mentor, but almost a bit of a therapist and a workbook manager and all those things that I do day to day as well. But on top of that, I've got my own fears and worries and challenges to deal with as well. I mean, I think the one thing I have taken away from this experience has been that as a manager, I think you really have to know your individuals in your team and really know them well. It's not really enough to just, you know, be the team head and let everyone come with it. You really have to know them as people too. So I think as I think now about all of those challenges, you know, and I've had real extremes of people, you know, sitting in a flat on their own, feeling very isolated. I've got people that have young families, they're trying to homeschool, they're trying to be productive. And I've had the comical experience of being in, you know, very important meetings where I've had one of my team members had their children burst in through the door, shouting and screaming behind them, pulling funny faces, you know, and it is mortifying for the person who is experiencing that. Less so actually for me, because people just laughed it off, but I think it's very difficult. So I think from my point of view, I guess there's a couple of things in that. One is, how can you as a manager really support your team and help them adapt to what's coming, especially as we look to coming back into the office from a work environment perspective, and what's going to be different? Because for those that are missing the social interaction, it is naturally going to be very different. It won't be the water cooler experience that they've had before. And then I think the other side of that, from my point of view, is really, how do I prevent the overwhelm for myself of trying to be something for everyone when I'm trying to deal with my own issues too?
Yeah, two really, again, really important, you know, points to raise and to draw, you know, attention to. I suppose if we, you know, break it down and look at it, you know, as you've raised them, so this, you know, the role of supporting a team. And I think, you know, a lot of the answers come in what you've highlighted as areas that you've become really aware of as this, you know, COVID experience has spread over the months. The first is that people are going to need some support, and they are going to need encouragement to feel safe to return to work. And perhaps one of the key roles that you can take in, or any manager actually with a team under them, is to mirror safety. It's to set up that this is a safe environment to return into, and offer back, you know, again, we need to load the system with cues for safety. So, you know, in terms of in a business setting, I suppose, you know, there's two areas on how to sit with that. First of all, it's how do you, you know, create a safe space in your organisation for people to bring their experiences, or for them to exhibit consequences of their experience. And I mention that because actually a safe place is something for all companies to look at, to make sure that you know, offering support doesn't always feel safe to employees. And again, you know, this is probably individual for individual companies, but what consists a safe space? Sometimes it's the HR department. People feel they can go to HR and HR can direct them to you know, a service. I have in my practice a number of people who will never go to HR because they cannot trust that there isn't something that is going to be on a record. So, or somewhere, you know, I have people who will say, I don't want anyone to know that I'm seeing you for depression. I don't want that known. And I'm really absolutely mindful of that. So I think in creating safe spaces around the colleagues and employees, it's really that the policies have to reflect absolutely what does safety mean in this instance. That's one thing to sort of have a sense on. Do you set up informal off the record? I suspect rather like you find your role growing, Gaynor, I'm now coping with this and this and this. But do you put in place people who are represent the bodies of employees who really might be affected? So we want to go counter to where most companies try and lend their policies now. Companies put in place, don't they, policies around discrimination. People put in place policies around equality. And actually, we almost have to dismantle that, because COVID is entirely discriminatory. We know that. It actually doesn't have any respect for saying everybody's equal in this workplace. So actually, our system for safety actually has to really draw attention to that there will be employees, particularly as you're saying, you have global employees who really feel vulnerable from this. And sometimes we have to be really clear who's giving this message. If it's someone who's white and relatively healthy looking and talks with confidence, that may, although it's meant to look safe, may actually trigger a real backlash in an implicit reaction. What do you know? If you've got members of staff who are represented by the BAME community, it's really important that their experience of feeling vulnerable is told to someone who they feel, yeah, they get it. They really get it. Likewise, we know the other discriminatory factors that COVID goes for. Age. Anybody who might be more elderly in the role. Anybody who may not have disclosed that they have an underlying health condition. Again, there's people who manage underlying health conditions and do not want this known at work. But actually, in this instance, it may affect their performance. So these are, people who are overweight. We know that there is a risk, and that might make them feel more vulnerable. So I think in creating this safe space, we have to have an environment which truly reflects, as I said, the discriminatory attack that COVID makes on our workforce. I think the other thing, yes, is probably a little bit around, just safety and connection. It is a little bit around putting in place, confidentiality. What's going to be confidentiality. These are, as I said, they are just points that you can put in place and maybe direct. It might be sometimes saying, I'm not the best person to talk to here, but I'd really like to point you in the direction of. And that can be an anonymous body. It can be any of those groups out there. There's many counselling organisations that are in place, or it can be something that work might like to set up. But I think it's really being safely signposting someone to the next stage. You mentioned a really important aspect to Gaynor about your role, that you find yourself perhaps in this role of listener. And without intention, people can come to you and offload and to say, where is, what's your capacity for self-care? In terms of training, when we train as counsellors, one of the, first steps is being able to almost split yourself into, I'm going to listen and I'm going to work to be with you in this situation, but I'm not working to be in your situation. So that actually we build these inbuilt defences. I'm going to be really available to be alongside you, but I'm not going to be subsumed in the information that you tell me about your story. So we have some really basic mechanisms in place that allow us to always hold on to where we are and what someone else is bringing. And perhaps the sort of final thing, because I don't want to take too long, but we can come back to it, is to really ensure that you don't get enticed into this role of fixer. people often are not asking you to fix the situation, but they are asking for a space in which they can express their worry or anxiety. They're not looking, as I said, for someone to give them a magic potion, but often the relief of just finding someone who can listen. I hear it in domestic, if I do couples counselling, you know, I often hear it with people who go, oh, for goodness sake, I didn't want her to fix anything. I just wanted her to listen how difficult my life was at the moment. And actually, yeah, sure, create a space where, you know, you are able to give and contain what the person is doing, and have your own boundaries. You know, have a boundary. How many people will I see today? Where do I actually ask someone else to take over this from me? So your own boundaries are probably really important to consider there. It's not letting anyone down. Say you can listen and then maybe support someone to go somewhere else. So those would be my sort of reflections on you know, perhaps things to, you know, just to consider, you know, in this return to work.
That's really helpful, Judith. If I was trying to turn to team, it's understanding the difference. Just, you know, to know that we're there and we're here, but it's certainly not an obligation to go back to an opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I was saying when we chatted briefly before, Gaynor, that, you know, there is a difference between taking someone and talking to them, and then your role as manager to communicate. You know, I think we said before, we cannot over communicate in this. We have to make ourselves as freely able to listen and to hear and respond. But we have to do it within the boundary of manager. And not in the personal space of Gaynor. It's to really be able to separate the two.
Thank you.
Yes, and thanks for that, Gaynor, because I'm going to take us back hopefully into the self. Even as a manager, I want to now talk about the impact on me as an individual of the change, the management of change, really. As I said in my introduction, I've just changed my job during lockdown. And what COVID has meant for me is that with my new job based in Australia, as many people have had to do, I have to find a new way, an entirely new way of working, because COVID means that I actually cannot get to my office. I have colleagues now who are 9 hours ahead of me, and I've got colleagues who are 8 hours behind. So I work a morning shift, I work an evening shift, so that I can deal with both teams. But I can't actually physically meet with my colleagues. Everything has to be done virtually. This isn't new for many of us, but for me, what I'm really finding as the issue is that, as we know, this is now business as unusual, as I call it. You know, COVID is no longer that exceptional, unprecedented issue that we faced back in February, March, April, as it built, with a dramatic long-term change that has now come in to the world. And really, it's how, you know, I can manage that change as I move into a new role. As I know many people will over the course of this, lawyers and non-lawyers combined, a lot of people will change role, and it's about how you manage to build and maintain those relationships. It's how you manage when I was one of those people who would very much sit on people's desks. I would wander around the offices, you'd have the water cooler conversation, you'd have the quick cup of coffee, the 5 minutes at lunch. All of those points of triangulation, all of those points of linkage where relationships build, trust builds, have all gone. So, you know, how can I now build those, and how can I effectively replace them? Because what you said earlier actually resonated with me. It's, you know, you highlighted really how uncertainty is the friend of anxiety, and effectively it becomes a compounding issue. You know, I'm not physically there. My usual way of working is not open to me anymore. So I have to find different ways of managing that change and managing those relationships. So a lot of people are going to be distant from their office for periods of time. So, you know, I'm hoping that it resonates with a number of the people on the call. What I've tried to do, and it's helped a little, but still I'm trying to work on how to get it better, is effectively recognize my lack of control in all of this. You know, as somebody, you know, and I think I haven't met a lawyer yet who doesn't have a little bit of that control freak in them. And the other great thing that lawyers can do is spot risk. So right now, that lack of control and all of those risks that I'm individually spotting are causing me those issues. So I've kind of gone back to first principles. I now do a lot more planning for meetings and conversations than I've ever done before. And I do a lot more self-reflecting. That's a good and a bad. You know, how can I do it better? What could I do different? And in part, this is part of that self-reflection. I also try to see the opportunities. You know, Gaynor pointed out, and I was on a call this morning where my colleagues' friends came bursting into the office. Yeah, it's funny, but also the great thing about it is it actually starts to break down barriers. Now, It may be my personal issue right now that I'm looking to break down barriers, but it's one of those things that I see, and the flexibility. I've also found a friend. Amazingly, I found somebody at my organisation who's in exactly the same situation, not in a different country, but he's actually working there and has never physically been into the office, never physically met anybody apart from her own line manager. So, you know, I'm trying to find a route through this to manage that uncertainty, manage that change. And, you know, I'm still kind to myself. I get out and do the walk. I get out and do the fresh air, and I don't beat myself up every day. But if you can help me with some pointers on how I balance this and what else I'm going to expect in the coming months before I can physically get back to my old way of working.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the first thing to say is I think you're doing, you know, in many respects, you know, you're doing a lot, and it's to keep you know, building on some of the approaches that you already have in place. I think, Grant, there is you know, you've recognized that, you know, one of the starting blocks is to actually identify what the barriers are. It's amazing how many people are sort of kind of working blind. So it is always being able to, you know, make these issues concrete. I think there is something that works well in organizational psychology, and that is to work out principal players. So the principal players here are you and COVID, actually. So first, you know, so what relationship are you going to take here? And somewhere this is our starting block. You know, to me, with all this experience, it is your role, fundamental role, is to continue what you already do, which is to be this manager in this new job, admittedly, mindful that it is taking place with COVID in the background, you know, as a major player, but it is secondary to you. It's extraordinary how many people actually go, yeah, and there's COVID and I'm trying to manage. Even switching the sentence the other way around actually puts intent in place, because then you lead by example. All the phrasing is around, this is our intention, this is my plan. You know, I intend to be with you as soon as travel allows, but this is my intent, this is my motivation, so that it's through COVID, and you are not in any way disempowered through this position of, you know, leadership by COVID. You know, you have a strategy around. So whatever your working principle, it's to always make it clear to the team that yes, you lead, mindful that you know, COVID sits somewhere. So I think that's, you know, one of the sort of, you know, the starting points. As I said, you know, what role do you want? I hear this, you know, how demanding that must be to work with teams in all different, you know, geographical locations, and the frustration of not being able to be with them. But again, I think the more we address and the more we say it as it is, the more authentic the interaction between you know, managers and parties around the world are. So it's not making us, you know, creating a series of strategies that don't go explained, but it's almost narrating in real time. Where I would now be on a plane and we would be having this meeting, I would be doing this, and I'd like to take you through this here. I know that soon there will be an opportunity without a specified date when I am with you, and when I am with you, I would like to. So it's narrating in current with lots of intention and lots of motivation, and not putting in there any negative. So, you know, if I use a counselling analogy, and I'm not quite sure how it switches to work, but in the NHS, we have 6 sessions with every patient who arrives. In private practice, I may have anything up to 36 sessions. But I never start an NHS session with, look, we only have 6 sessions. I always start with, we have plenty of time. Where shall we start? And then begin to shape where we go with the constraint. My role is always to say, this is where we can go in this plenty of time. And I think what you're saying about reflection, it sounds as if that's a, you know, a principle that would work here. You know, not to highlight the frustrations, but actually what you were saying, you know, you can find opportunity here without pretending that these roadblocks to you physically being somewhere, you know, don't exist. Really authentic, acknowledging that they're there, but you have an approach to work around that. As I said, you know, you're first of all the leader, and second, you are in the time of COVID. And it's always, you know, how do I couch that so that this comes across? Quite how you manage all those time, you know, I don't know, I'd be flat out if I had 2 different time zones and I was here, there and everywhere. I mean, that's an interesting one. I don't know what you're, you know, do you have a program? You were saying, you know, you do the walking and the exercise, you know, is that enough? Do you need more?
Yeah, no, thank you. This is really helpful. I probably do need more in the middle of the day. You know, I think there's a lot of people on this call who manage international teams, who work in international teams, and it's almost like this is perfectly natural in one respect. It's what I've done for 15, 20, 25 years. In another respect, in the time of COVID, you're right. It's what we tell ourselves. I've got to manage this and say, right, you know, I'd love to have been there, but I will get there fairly soon. You know, we'll be able to get back to the travel. We will be able to get back to the meeting up. So, you know, I understand. You know, I've got to think through how I look at that relationship between me and COVID and manage that. But something else that resonated that you said to Gaynor, and I think is coming through here, is also about finding the safe space for yourself.
Absolutely.
You know, Gaynor, you were absolutely talking about the safe space for the team to come, but I think it's also about the safe space for me as an individual and what that means. You know, I was prompted this evening chatting to my partner before this. You know, they said, oh, you know, don't forget, you do go walking, you do get out, you do actually do this, and that's your way of actually managing some of this. And it's like sometimes you don't think what you actually manage.
Yeah, I think that's so good, and that comes back to it's a really good point actually, Grant, because it's so much around reminding this nervous system that actually there are safety out there, and every time that we register with one, it's actually to really bank it. You know, there are other things around cues for safety. You know, we're born all of us with an innate social engagement system. We are born because we seek to have connection with people. That's why isolation has been such a difficult word, as opposed to just having a sort of a protective space. You know, this whole, we've used very aggressive, quite intimidating around a behaviour, where really we've been looking after ourselves. But in terms of talking to people, you know, to lower and to engage with this engagement system that we're born with, we respond to cues of safety, and that comes from everything from lowering our voice, actually speaking more slowly. Oddly, over Zoom, though, the research at the moment coming out of the States is if you speak with your head to one side, actually the connections around, you know, it's an implicit response, explicit reaction, but the implicit response is to feel that that person is listening. And if the person is listening, then it is worth them speaking. And if it's worth them speaking, they still have a role and still have a purpose, regardless of COVID. So we respond to, as I said, implicitly to many of the cues that we are given, and we can really bring that into work practice. There are, you know, others one just to note in terms of how to be and how important it is when they haven't yet met you. So they won't have perhaps quirky personality. It's harder to gauge that when you have to sit in front of camera and you can't, you know, sort of joke and respond in the same way. We miss those body cues for this is a sign for engagement. This is a sign for actually be more professional. We don't have those opportunities. There are a couple of other things that just around self-help, which, you know, I'm fed up with counsellors and therapists saying this, but actually their role of meditation and breathing plays such an important part. We talk about mindfulness, and actually mindfulness is a bit of a misnomer. The mindfulness implies that it's something that's trying to, you know, sort of calm the mind. It is, but actually mindfulness is all about stilling and finding ourselves in a better space in our central nervous system. So the more we breathe, our central nervous system responds to breath. We are frightened. We breathe shallowly. That changes our you know, our oxygen intake. We can't breathe so deeply. If we don't breathe deeply, our diaphragm can't go down as far as we really need it to do, so it touches the vagal nerve. The vagal nerve feels it's taken note of. It will calm us down. So actually the point of breathing is because it does have a mental benefit as well in meditation, but it has such a deeply physiological response to giving our nerve, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay, Grant's got it. You know, he's on this, he's okay. But actually we can get there by really calming down our nervous system, and that's what the breath work is really all about. When we feel calmer, we speak more slowly, we join up our thoughts more clearly, and you know, it's really encouraging people to be able to take the slow space so that the thinking brain doesn't get knocked offline, because the emotion has so much energy. Breathing slows that whole process down, so that when I was saying earlier on, right at the beginning, our thoughts, behaviours, our thoughts, our feelings and our behaviours all affect the other. If we slow down our breathing, we have much better regulation of how our thought impacts our feeling, which can impact our behaviour. So, you know, I always come back to this, you know, the importance of grounding us, you know, really being able to take some deep breaths, doing something that gives us fun. You know, what you were saying, I think Grant is absolutely right. What do you enjoy doing? What gives us fun? You know, and to engage staff in this. I mean, you know, there is, you know, a level of, you know, I was working with one company the other day, and theirs was they've tasked every staff member with coming up with their favourite tune that most represents their experience COVID. You know, what does it mean to have lived through these last few months? And what song gives them the most impetus, positive energy to get out of it? And they, you know, and it's a lovely, you know, it's a lovely experience to have. You know, always mindful that people's experiences might have gone, you know, always from not touched by it at all to absolutely the other end, you know, lost someone, and always being able to engage with it. COVID gives you a universal language. It's an experience that every single person that you talk to shares. And actually that's usually more powerful than whatever the company's mission statement is. Actually, you've got a bond that goes really far beyond branding or, as I said, mission statements. You really have a source of connection here. And sometimes it's using that as well.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Let me hand back to Rebecca.
So maybe we can take a couple of questions. So if we've got time, I think we do have a few minutes to do that. So I think one of the questions that we've not really touched on is kind of change the focus from ourselves and our team towards our families, in the sense, you know, one of the positives that come out of all of this for me has been spending time with my boys, and you know that they're teenagers, so it's a bit different. You know, we have meals together, that's all I see of them, but that's been a big plus. There's a lot of people out there that have young families, very young families, that have, you know, really formed another bond or a new bond with those children, and there'll be an expectation from those children that, you know, all of a sudden both parents are back at work. What is going on, and how can we help those family members cope with this transition as we go back to the offices?
Yeah, so again, you know, really relevant point. Well, I suppose, you know, there's two things to do. First of all is to go back to, you know, the heady days of November 2019. We left our children all the time. They were able to cope. We've done it before. So this isn't a new, this is a how to get back to something that worked really well before. So one of the, you know, the starting points of that is to really try and identify, you know, what it is that's causing this anxiety now. I think generally it's referred to as revisiting separation anxiety. It's something around you've managed separation anxiety in the past, but we've all lived through it when we've dropped a child off at school for the first time, when we moved out of home for the first time. You know, we've experienced this, and again, we got through it because we had strategies. We really went back to, again, talking about it. It's two things. It's a talked about experience, and it's a really sharing. It's really sharing it with the kids, not necessarily fixing it for the kids, so that they are involved in this, and it really is an organic process. They had COVID really dropped on them, so this again is helping. It's using those transition stages. Small changes, small steps, usually the best way to cope again, I think. So maybe a dry run, you know, one parent goes out, explains what's happening, mum comes over, you know, there's an explanation, maybe a story. And I think actually when you're sort of explaining what's happening, I would make one observation, which I think is really important when dealing with younger children, is when you're going to explain what's happening, it's the explanation that is told in terms of facts. So this is what's going to happen. You know, mum's going to get up, dad's going to have that. You know, mum will make sure you get your breakfast, dad's going to do the packed lunch. You know, whatever, however it works. And then you get to the end of the story goes, and then we'll all be at home for supper. And the final word of that is great. So many parents will end it with a okay. And the okay is the unmantling of all that good work that you've just done. Because children actually, when they're really being told something, no parent ends it with okay. Because, you know, they will run back things in their life. When I go to bed and you tell me my bedtime is 9 o'clock, you don't go, it's 9 o'clock, okay? And then you're told you've got to do your maths homework. They don't say, you know, do you want to do your maths homework? Okay. Actually, parents are really good about giving instruction. Okay. Do you want to play on your Xbox for the next 5 minutes? Is that okay? No, it's actually, you've got until, I don't know, 8 o'clock and then the Xbox goes off. Full stop. So actually what we want to try to do in that situation is to be really bounded by where we go. So we want to be affirmative. It's back. If a kid hears okay, in there, again, in a sort of probably unexpressed response, they will hear something other than authority. And all that we need at the moment is to stay in the place of, I know what to do, and I'm back to being able to be in a secure routine. They may kick off, you know, kids kick off all the time. Yeah, kick off, that's fine, that's also normal. Anything that is normal, great. We're back into, you know, back to, you know, as a parent, you go, well, I know what to do here. Make it, you know, give it an explanation, do a couple of test runs, break it down so that there is a transition back to whatever it is that they're facing, and relay it in ways which remind them that actually mum and dad know what they're doing. And that ends with sometimes including them with a discussion, but actually when they need to really know something, it's explained as a, this is what's going to happen. That would be my sort of maybe observation.
Thank you. Again, if we don't have any the feed, I haven't had a look. I don't think we do.
Nothing else on the feed, Rebecca, for the moment. So,
unless you want to go through any other questions, and it's 5 to 7. Yep. Okay. So thank you very much. This really does bring us to the end. I should have said at the beginning that we have a very long hour. There was nothing short about it. So we have hopefully tried to address as many things as we can during that period, and hopefully you have been able to take away a few nuggets of advice. And also just be mindful that there is an employee assistance program that your company will have. So do have a look at that. So when we've been talking about signposting people, trying to remember that you're not the fixer for everything, but you certainly can help to signpost people, whether it's through the organisation of the EAP or whether it's externally with a professional body, such as someone like Judith. So thank you very much. I also want to just let you know about the Wellbeing at the Bar. As some of you may know about it or not, it's by the Bar Council, and it does have a really good website for lots of resources. So even though it's targeted really to the self-employed bar, but it has a huge amount of resource on that website, that also some of it is available to the employed bar as well. But there's lots of stories on there, lots of blogs, lots of events that are open to everybody. So I would recommend having a look at that. So thank you very much, Judith, for giving us some free advice, basically, and very good advice. And I hope that it really resonates with lots of people that have been listening in. We do have our next event. So if you do have your pens and papers or your phones, however you put your events into your calendars, on the 25th of September, we will be celebrating 55 whole years of BACFI. And again, it will be a virtual event. Will be 1 whole hour from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Please bring your own drinks. I don't think we'll be providing it, but watch this space. So feel free to put your videos on and keep your mute buttons off so that we can all speak and see each other again until we can all meet again in person. So thank you very much. And thank you to Grant and Gaynor as well. And I wouldn't be able to do it without you. And Sandra, thank you.
Thank you. Good night, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.